Okay, first of all, I know the history behind the WNBA. I know that both of those cities have had teams before and they got us where we're at, so I'm thankful for that.
A storm is brewing in the WNBA, but it's not the one you think. Well, everyone has been laser-focused on Caitlin Clark's every move, her record-breaking plays, the unprecedented ticket sales, the global media frenzy. A far more explosive story has been unfolding right beside her, inside her own locker room. A story of loyalty so fierce it borders on rebellion, and a bombshell that was dropped not to tear the Indiana Fever apart but to save its biggest star from the very league she is elevating. Sophie Cunningham, Clark's teammate, has been on a war path, and her recent statements have sent shock waves through the entire sport. But the truth of what she said, and why she said it, is a story the league office does not want you to hear. It's a story about the unspoken rules of the WNBA, the targeting of its brightest star sent a teammate who decided she had seen enough. The whispers turned into headlines overnight, twisting a narrative of fierce protection into one of petty jealousy. But the reality was far more jarring. What was the bombshell that Cunningham truly dropped about Caitlin Clark's impending return to the court? The answer is far more shocking than any rumored rivalry and reveals a desperate fight for the future of the league itself. It has left fans speechless, questioning everything they thought they knew about the dynamic inside the Indiana Fever, and it may just be the catalyst that forces the WNBA to confront its own demons before it's too late. The battle lines have been drawn not between teammates but between the players and the powers that be. When news first broke that Sophie Cunningham had made explosive comment related to Caitlin Clark, the internet did what it does best. It jumped to conclusions. The narrative practically wrote itself, fueled by a long history of veteran-rookie tensions in professional sports. The immediate assumption was jealousy. It had to be a story of a disgruntled veteran tired of living in the shadow of a 23-year-old superstar who had, in a matter of months, become the center of the basketball universe. For months, the league has been painted as a battlefield, with Clark as the primary target. We've seen the hard fouls, the on-court trash talk, and the endless debates about whether the old guard resents the new queen who arrived with a crown already on her head. So when Cunningham's name, a respected, tough-as-nails veteran, entered the mix, it seemed like the perfect confirmation of an internal team rivalry, the kind of drama that fuels sports media for weeks. Fans and pundits alike were ready to dissect every word, looking for the telltale signs of a locker room divided. It felt like a classic case of a team's internal fabric tearing under the intense pressure of a generational talent. But as the dust settled, a new, far more startling reality began to emerge. Bombshell wasn't one of jealousy or resentment. It was something far more complex, and for the WNBA far more dangerous. The story wasn't about a teammate wanting to take Clark down. It was about a teammate willing to burn down the entire system to protect her, revealing that the real war wasn't inside the locker room but was directed squarely at the league itself. Yet the bombshell that Sophie Cunningham dropped wasn't an attack. It was a declaration of war on anyone who dared to undermine Caitlin Clark. In one of the most unfiltered rants in recent memory, Cunningham took to her podcast to defend her teammate with a ferocity that stunned listeners. She directly addressed the critics and the haters, the ones who tried to downplay Clark's monumental impact on the WNBA. Her words were raw and direct when she said it, quite literally. Pisses me off when people are like, she's not the face of the league. But she didn't stop there. In a statement that immediately went viral, she laid down the ultimate marker of loyalty, claiming that anyone who argues the league would be where it is without Clark is, in her own uncensored words, dumb as. You're literally dumb as feet. This was the real bombshell. Yet it wasn't a fracture in the team. It was the revelation of its new identity. Indiana Fever weren't just a collection of players. They were a fortress. Sophie Cunningham had just appointed herself the lead guard at the gate. She wasn't just a teammate. She was Clark's enforcer. The fan reaction was immediate and seismic. The narrative of jealousy evaporated, replaced by an overwhelming wave of respect for Cunningham's unwavering loyalty. This passionate defense established a new narrative. To get to Caitlin Clark, you first have to go through Sophie Cunningham, and she is not afraid to fight back, both with her words and with her actions on the court. Cunningham's defense of Clark quickly moved from words to brutal physical action, but her role as the team's enforcer was solidified during a now infamous game against the Connecticut Sunday. Throughout the contest, Caitlin Clark was subjected to relentless aggressive physicality that seemed to escalate with each possession. The tipping point came after a sequence of plays that left fans and teammates fuming. Clark was first raked across the face by JCS Sheldon on a drive to the basket, a foul that went under scrutiny. Then, in a separate play that felt far more intentional, she was shoved hard to the ground by Marina Maberry, a blatant act of aggression away from the ball. Officials' response was seen by many as weak, and a feeling began to brew that Clark was being hunted without protection. Cunningham clearly felt the same way, her frustration visibly mounting on the sideline. With the game decided and only seconds left on the clock, she delivered her own form of justice. As Sheldon drove for a meaningless layup, Cunningham wrapped her up with a hard foul that had no intention of playing the ball, sending her opponent to the floor. A brief melee erupted, leading to multiple ejections, including Cunningham's. The move was instantly polarizing. Critics, including the Suns' coach, called the foul stupid and disrespectful, but many others, including Las Vegas AC's coach Becky Hammond, praised the action, seeing it as a necessary retaliation, a form of self-policing. When the officials fail, Cunningham had sent a league-wide message. If the referees weren't going to protect the WNBA star player, she would. The incident cemented her reputation as the goon every superstar needs. See, the one willing to risk fines and ejections to stand up for her teammate when no one else will. Having established her authority on the court, Sophie Cunningham took her fight to the airwaves, launching a full-scale verbal assault on the WNBA's officiating. She used her podcast show, Me Something, as a platform to voice her grievances, risking and accumulating thousands of dollars in fines for her candid criticism. Her main point of contention was the extreme level of physicality the referees were allowing, which she argued was getting out of hand and leading directly to injuries across the league. She spoke with raw frustration about watching her teammates get battered on the court without adequate protection from the officials, citing the brutal facial injury suffered by Lexi Hull as a prime example of the league's failure to control the game. Cunningham's argument was nuanced. She wasn't against physicality itself, stating, "I think the league is very physical, and I think it needs to be that way." However, she fiercely argued that the refs had lost control, allowing the games to become chaotic and dangerous, where the line between tough defense and intentional harm was being repeatedly Cross. She stated that while playoff basketball is expected to be more physical, the entire 2025 regular season felt like a brawl where players were out there killing each other. This crusade wasn't just about general player safety. It was intrinsically linked to Caitlin Clark. Cunningham saw the league's biggest asset being targeted nightly, with cheap shots and overly aggressive play, and felt the officials were failing in their duty to protect her. Sentiment she directly expressed after her retaliatory foul against the Sun, her willingness to repeatedly defy the league and risk fines to speak this truth became another pillar of her bombshell campaign to force change. Sophie Cunningham's rebellion didn't stop with the referees. She aimed her criticism directly at the very top of the WNBA's power structure, Commissioner Cathy Engelbert, in a move that few players would dare to make. Cunningham publicly and scathingly blasted the commissioner, accusing her of mismanagement, disrespect, and a fundamental misunderstanding of her own players. The conflict ignited after Lynx star Napaza Collier revealed a private conversation where Engelbert allegedly dismissed player concerns and downplayed Clark's value, suggesting Clark should be grateful for what the league provide her rather than the other way around. This lit a fire under Cunningham, who used her platform to amplify the players' frustrations. She slammed Engelbert, stating on her podcast that it always seems to be about what the commissioner wants, not what is best for the league or its athletes. She went even further, questioning where the massive revenue generated by the Caitlin Clark effect was going, implying it wasn't being reinvested into the players who are the actual product. To Cunningham criticized the league's leadership for having the same people on board for 27 years, and for failing to work with the players to capitalize on the WNBA's biggest moment in history. The direct challenge to the commissioner was perhaps the most shocking part of her campaign. It transformed her from a mere ONC court enforcer into a leading voice in a potential player mutiny, demanding respect and reform from the highest office in the league and exposing a deep chasm between the players and the administration. So, why did Sophie Cunningham risk fines, ejections, and the wrath of the league's front office to wage this one-woman war? The answer lies in the very subject of the video's title, Caitlin Clark's return. The 2025 season was a brutal introduction to the WNBA for Clark, not just because of the on-court aggression, but because of the physical toll it took. Clark's phenomenal rookie campaign was marred by various soft tissue injuries that ultimately forced her to miss a significant portion of the season. The constant grabbing, holding, and hard hits away from the ball, often ignored by officials, contributed to a body breaking down under the strain. Culmination of this punishment was a devastating groin injury she suffered in July, which sidelined her for the remainder of the season, and most critically the Fever's entire playoff run. Cunningham, who also battled her own season-ending injury, had a front-row seat to the punishment Clark endured and the devastating consequences. Her bombshell campaign can be seen as a desperate preemptive strike to change the league's environment before Clark's full healthy return in 2026. The Cunningham argued that the WNBA's out-of-control physicality wasn't just bad for the game's watchability. It was a direct threat to the longevity of it. Most important asset. She saw a league celebrating the unprecedented attention Clark was bringing while simultaneously allowing a culture that could prematurely end her career. Her public crusade against the refs and the commissioner was a rebellion born out of loyalty, a calculated effort to force the WNBA to protect its golden goose, ensuring that Clark's return wouldn't be another injury-riddled battle for survival. In the end, Sophie Cunningham's bombshell wasn't a single quote, but a sustained explosion of truth, aimed at the foundations of the WNBA. It was never about a rivalry with Caitlin Clark. It was a fierce and calculated campaign to protect her. She transformed herself from just a teammate into an enforcer, a spokesperson, and a rebel willing to absorb the consequences of speaking out when no one else would. She physically retaliated on the court, verbally challenged the referees on her podcast, and directly took on the league's commissioner, all in the name of her superstar rookie. Her actions have been a stark warning to the league. Adapt or risk destroying the greatest asset you have ever had. The question is no longer if there is a problem, but whether the WNBA will heed the warning before it's too late. Caitlin Clark prepares for her monumental return to the court, fully healthy and ready to resume her takeover of the sport. She does so with the undeniable knowledge that her most ferocious defender is standing right beside her. Sophie Cunningham's bombshell has redefined what it means to be a teammate, leaving fans to wonder if this was a singular act of loyalty or the first shot fired in a revolution that will reshape the future of women's basketball forever. The stage is set for Clark's return, but the league she is returning to has been irrevocably changed by the teammate who refused to stay silent.